Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Liberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how.
Do you feel like you don't have enough time to work on business development as an independent consultant? Maybe you're fully utilized with client work and you don't feel like you have a spare minute for business development. Or maybe the summer season is approaching if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere and you feel like you don't want to work on business development. You have vacations coming up and your kids are home from school and it feels like you've got more responsibilities on your plate and less time for business development. Or maybe you just have a busy time of year personally with vacations or caring for sick family members or whatever the reason is. There's 1,000 of them, right? 1,000 of reasons why we think we don't have enough time for business development. And it becomes incredibly easy to drop the ball on running our business as a result. And today I want to share with you a technique for you to use so you can keep growing your independent consulting business even when you're fully utilized or even when you have a lot on your plate. It is not something you want to pick up and drop down and pick up and put down. Running your business is something you want to keep doing all of the time. But we also want to take into account that you do have a life and you do have other responsibilities in your business. So let's make this manageable, especially in the busiest of seasons for you. All right. So, in essence, today we're covering working on your consulting business when you have no time to work on your consulting business. That's what it comes down to. Welcome to episode 271 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business. This is Melisa Liberman, and today we're talking about the bare minimum plan to keep your consulting business on track and growing when you're at capacity. So exciting. You don't have to be doing all the things all of the time. And I want to share with you today this technique so that you know exactly what you want to be doing all of the time and make sure that it fits in even when you've got those really busy weeks, those fully utilized times. This will work for you. All right, my friend, let's talk about the agenda. First, I'll share with you a companion resource that goes with today's episode. It will give you a jump start to putting what we're talking about today into action. Then we'll talk about what working on your business actually means. I say this a lot on this podcast, and you hear it, I'm sure, elsewhere all the time. Working on your business. Let's just be really clear about what that means as a foundational piece of this episode. Then we'll talk about why being at capacity is one of the most dangerous times for your business and what to do about that. And then what you can temporarily deprioritize. We don't need to be doing all the things all the time, right? Let's take a moment, take a step back and think about what is it that you can temporarily deprioritize and the benefit of that. There's benefit beyond that you physically can't fit it in, logistically can't fit it in. And so you aren't doing these things. There's benefit beyond that with deprioritizing intentionally. And we'll talk about that. Then I will share with you a 3-part bare minimum plan so you know exactly what you're doing to work on your business at all times, even when you're incredibly busy or even when you've got a couple of weeks off in a month for vacation. What are you going to do those other 2 weeks so that you don't create big gaps in revenue for yourself? And then finally, we will wrap up the episode with specific steps to put the episode into action. So that's what our plan is here for today. Let's start off with the companion resource. I've built a new resource for you. It's called the ACE Business Development Session One Pager. The ACE Business Development Session One Pager. What does it do? It helps you to know exactly what you're going to do when you sit down and you say, I have a block on my calendar for business development for the next 30 minutes or for the hour. When you have a block on your calendar, if you don't have a block, you should have one, but that's beside the point. When you have that block on your calendar, you'll have a one pager that tells you exactly how to use that time most effectively and most efficiently So you're not sitting there staring at a blank screen. So you're not sitting there wondering what you should say. So you're not sitting there wondering what you should do. It gives you the exact routine that you can leverage to make the most out of that 30 minutes of business development time that you have in your calendar. And just so you know, I've actually built it for 26 minutes. So you've got a couple of minutes to go get a drink or take a short break. All right. So it's all encompassing. You can go grab that at www.theacebd.com. BD for business development, theacebd.com. All right, my friend, let's now dive into this bare minimum plan. And let's start off with just setting the foundation here. What does working on your business actually mean? Working on your business is essentially everything but client delivery. That's working in your business. That's being the doer. That's being the executor. That's being the person who's responsible for delivering the work that you sell. Working on the business, when I say that, is everything but that client delivery. So it ranges from admin, invoicing, collecting, meeting your CPA, doing visibility activities, relationship building, networking, going to events, attending association meetings, engaging in the forum related to your association online, selling, capturing your intellectual property, sitting down and doing thinking time as a CEO, as the business owner, setting strategy. All of this matters. All of this is important to work on your business, but not equally all of the time. You can't be doing all of those things all of the time and responsible for client delivery. We have such a unique business model in that it's lean, it's highly profitable when run correctly, it's highly fulfilling when run correctly, it's very autonomous when run correctly. But at the same time, it does require us to wear so many different hats. But we can't do those all equally all of the time. And that's what today's episode is about, is really figuring out for yourself, what is your bare minimum plan, so you know what has to happen all of the time. It's very little, but what is it? And then not giving yourself a hard time when you're not doing all of the things all of the time. Okay, that's what I mean by working on the business. Now, let's talk about why this matters. Why this matters. And you likely know the answer already, but just in case you don't, let's just remind ourselves that when we're fully at capacity or fully utilized, it can be one of the most dangerous times in the business. Now, you might think, well, it's the best time because I'm generating revenue. And of course, that's true. And it's very dangerous because when you're slammed, working on the business feels optional. You tell yourself you'll get back to it when things slow down, or next week will be better, so you'll catch up then. These are common things we tell ourselves. But this is exactly how the next dry spell gets created. When you're slammed or very busy with client work, or really even busy on a personal level, and working on your business feels optional, so you kick the can down the road, that's when the next dry spell gets created. And you know this, we've talked about it on this podcast before, the cycle of reactivity. The engagement ends, your pipeline is empty because you've been kicking the can down the road and thinking, I don't have time for business development. And then you're starting from zero. That is why it's so dangerous to be fully utilized. You know this, fully utilized right now doesn't mean you're going to be fully utilized in 3 months from now or 6 months from now. Even if you have a 9-month or a 12-month contract, it doesn't always mean that. The consultants who stay consistently utilized, the consultants who hit their revenue targets, the consultants who even exceed their revenue targets work on their business consistently, not just when they have time. And that's why this is so important. That's why we're here today. And that's why I want to encourage you to create one of these bare minimum plans. Let's start off with the bare minimum plan and recognize that there are things you can temporarily deprioritize. So when you're fully utilized on client work, or you're only working 2 months out of, or 2 weeks out of a month because you've got vacation that you want to go on or time off that you want to take. Of course, there are things you're not going to do. There are things you are not going to do that you'll deprioritize. Then there are things that we're focusing this episode on, which is your bare minimum plan. You're going to keep doing them, but at the bare minimum level, right? So let's first recognize that there are things that can be deferred or even skipped. Business development is not one of them, by the way, right? And you want to get more granular on what that really means. What does it mean to have a bare minimum for business development? We'll talk about that here in a second. But figure out what you can defer or even skip. And I'll give you 3 questions you can use to start figuring this out. Here they are. Number 1, ask yourself, if I skip this for the next 60 days, what actually happens? You can just do a brain dump of all the things that you do on a weekly basis in your business, all the things that you think you should be doing that you don't do, that you're criticizing yourself for. Put those on the list too. And then go through all of that and ask yourself one by one, if I skip this for the next 60 days, what will actually happen? And be honest with yourself. Don't make up something that's not true. And also don't overlook something that is true. And then secondly, ask yourself and answer, does this, going line by line through that brain dump of activities that you do on a weekly basis, does this directly contribute to landing my next engagement? It's another really important sign. Does this directly contribute to landing my next engagement? And thirdly, ask yourself and answer, am I doing this because it moves my business or because it feels productive? That's my favorite question of all 3. Am I doing this because it moves my business or because it feels productive? If you're honest in answering that, a lot of the stuff will fall off. It can be deferred or skipped, right? So we'll put those 3 questions in the show notes. You can get to them by going in your podcast player. You'll see a link for full show notes. Click that link. It will take you to the full website for this episode. And then you'll find those questions along with what we're about to go through in terms of your bare minimum plan. You'll see all of that. Okay. Whatever doesn't survive those 3 questions, then take it off the list for now. It's not your bare minimum plan. And this is the first step in how we're going to make that bare minimum plan actually doable. So go answer those questions for yourself. Do that exercise I just gave you. So now we've taken a lot off the top, right? We've taken a lot of activities completely off the top. And what's left should be your core essential activities, the core essentials. And we want to take those and build them into a bare minimum plan for you. These are the things you cannot drop. They're not the things you don't want to drop. They're not the things that you feel excited to do. They're not the things that make you feel comfortable. They're not the things that give you the dopamine when you finish them and you feel good to check it off your list. That's not what we've got here. What we've got is your bare minimum, the core essentials that need to occur in order for you to hit your revenue goals and continuously land clients who are high quality, who pay the pricing that you want to be charging, who have fulfilling work you want to be doing, and that allow you to have the autonomy that you want to have. So we're going to build out this plan in 3 parts. The 3 parts are your bare minimum thinking, your actual bare minimum plan, and then finally making your bare minimum successful. So it's a super simple process, which is fitting, right? We're making a bare minimum. This is a simple process. Let's start with the bare minimum thinking. That's part 1 of your bare minimum plan or your bare minimum strategy. By default, for most of us as independent consultants, what I find is that we don't have a good mental model of what bare minimum is, right? We've been taught for our whole lives, for many of us, I know I have, you probably have too, that doing the bare minimum is not good. Like it is bad. It is bad to do the bare minimum. I mean, I say it to my high schooler all the time. You should not be doing the bare minimum. We think of it as skating by. We think of it as, oh, well, I'll do the bare minimum, but I'm going to pay the price later. That's the way that you may be thinking too, that so many of us think about the bare minimum. But I want to say to you also that while those things are not productive, it's also not productive or not even true when you say, I'll do it when things slow down. That's almost a lie, also, right? When we think to ourselves, well, I can't get to that this week. I have such a busy week. Look at my calendar. I'm jam packed with meetings all day long. There's no way I could possibly fit in business development into this calendar. I'll do it next week when things are slower. I've got some gaps in my calendar. That's the logical thing we tell ourselves. But it's almost always a lie. It's like the easiest excuse we can make, right? Because it's so justified. Oh, look at my calendar. It's so jam packed. I just simply do not have time for business development. You do have time for business development. I created a 26-minute process for you that you can go download and implement. You have 26 minutes, even if you did them in 3 parts of 9 minutes, right? You have the time. It's a lie when you say, I don't have time or I'll do it when things slow down. It's a lie that we tell ourselves because lets us off the hook and it makes us feel better and it feels justified. But at the end of the day, when you think about doing the bare minimum, you want to get yourself into the headspace that the bare minimum is effective and the bare minimum is something that you know that you'll never waver on, that you're not a business owner that skips the bare minimum, except for if you're on vacation or you've purposely chosen to fully take time off, right? But if you're actually working, then you're also doing your bare minimum. So the bare minimum thinking is creating a mental relationship with the concept of the bare minimum, that the bare minimum is enough, will be plenty even, and that you can accomplish the bare minimum. Being okay with doing less than usual is not laziness, it's a strategy. When I was writing this episode and brainstorming, that felt like such a flip of what we're normally taught, right? When you think about the bare minimum, we normally think as skating by versus no, the bare minimum is actually a strategy. How does that sound to you? To me, it was when I wrote that on my paper, I was like, oh, that feels liberating. That the bare minimum is not laziness. The bare minimum is not skating by. The bare minimum is strategy. And the reason why is that it helps you to get to the place of keeping the fire burning, right? Versus doing nothing because you feel overwhelmed or you tell yourself you don't need to do anything. Consistency at a lower level beats inconsistency at a higher level. And you want to mentally give yourself permission to do the bare minimum. A couple of thoughts that I'll offer to you to fortify this bare minimum thinking is number one, the thought process that the bare minimum will help you reach your goals, that the bare minimum is plenty to reach your goals. You might think something like the bare minimum creates the results that I want, like some thought process that you believe that will counteract the bare minimum isn't enough. The bare minimum is skating by. The bare minimum is bad. We want to counteract that with the bare minimum is a strategy to create the results you want over the course of a year. So you want to create a thought plan around the concept of the bare minimum and also that the bare minimum works for you. I know for me, sometimes I think the bare minimum doesn't work for me. It works for other people, but it doesn't work for me. If I think back to high school, like all of those boys, at least the ones I remember, even my son now in high school, I feel like they got very close to the same amount of grades with a lot less effort involved. Maybe not the highest GPA, but certainly one that set them off to where they needed to be with doing very little work. Meanwhile, I'm like up all night, perfecting some assignment. This is not helpful, right? So for you, if you're in that same situation where you were someone who considered themselves a good student, who did all the work, who did extra credit, who did all the things, you might not have a relationship to this bare minimum thinking in a way that's productive, right? So you want to start rewiring that. Thinking to yourself, the bare minimum is part of my winning strategy. The bare minimum is my new winning strategy. I can figure out how to make the bare minimum work for me. Like those types of thoughts start rewiring where you are thinking by default right now, likely from early age of what you might have been thinking about the bare minimum and what it means. You want to create a thought plan for yourself around the bare minimum and you doing the bare minimum. And I gave you some starting points for that just now. At the end of the day, staying in motion is what matters. You've done this before, probably, right? Like if you exercise a lot and then for some reason you don't exercise for a few weeks, getting back on into your routine is painful. It takes a while versus just keep going, even if it's walking because you don't have the equipment available to you at the moment or whatever it is. It's keeping yourself in motion. An object in motion stays in motion, right? That I love that principle for this concept too. Okay, so that was the bare minimum thinking that you want to put in place. Please don't skip that step. That step is really important because if we just go operating off of our normal way of thinking, likely it will send you into the path of costing you double what it should be costing you. And let me say it this way. If you just go about the way you've been doing things, which is typically, if you're like most consultants, feeling like you should be doing more, criticizing yourself for not doing more, feeling guilty that you haven't done more, feeling regret that you haven't done more, you're paying a double tax. Not only have you not done the work of the bare minimum, and so therefore you've created gaps in your pipeline, for example, but then you're adding that emotional tax on top of it. You're paying double. Just go figure out the bare minimum. We'll talk about that next. What is the bare minimum? And apply this bare minimum thinking to it so that you're not paying either of those taxes, right? You're doing the actual work and you don't have to feel regretful as long as you implement the thought plan, which is like the bare minimum is plenty. The bare minimum is a strategy. The bare minimum is part of my overall plan to hit my goals this year. That's the bare minimum thinking that you want to be putting in place. Okay, now let's move on to the actual bare minimum plan. So far, if you remember, we took all the activities that are not necessary off the top and we were left with, so you're skipping them or deferring them, right? And so now we're left with what is the bare minimum? What do you think is the most important activities that need to occur in your business? And what does bare minimum of those activities actually look like? The other way I'll say this is not what you think you should be doing. This is what you can actually do that moves the needle, that solves one of those three questions we were talking about earlier. And I've been using business development and lead generation as one of the examples, but you want to really take a step back and look at your business and say, what are my 2 to 3 highest leverage activities? Lead generation, of course, that one is on the list. That is on the list. Even if you're fully utilized for the next 12 months, that should be on the list. Sales, that should be on the list. Accounts payable and accounts receivable. If you don't have a bookkeeper, those are on the list, right? Is there business owner thinking time? For you, what are those 2 to 3 highest leverage activities that you know need to be done no matter what? And know what they are, right? Don't just write down lead generation. It's actually, I am going to network with 3 people a week, or I'm going to meet 2 new people a week, and I'm going to reconnect with 1 person a week. Like you want to be super clear. And for your business owner thinking time, it might be that you decide you're going to have 15 minutes to zoom back out and think about your business and fortify your business owner way of thinking and come up with a new intellectual property or ideas and patterns that you're seeing across clients, as an example. You get to decide, but you want to be very specific about what it is. Not just writing down lead generation or business owner thinking time or selling. It's about what those actually are. What are the 2 to 3 highest leverage activities that you will do within those that is your bare minimum plan? And then you want to decide how much time you can realistically protect on a daily and weekly basis. And maybe monthly, could be monthly. I wouldn't go much beyond that. I wouldn't go into quarterly. Gives you too much room to negotiate with yourself. And then you literally do the math, right? You figure out what are those activities that you're doing? What's the bare minimum? Could be, I'm going to connect with 2 people from my warm network a week, and I'm going to meet 1 new person a week. Simple. Where does that go in your calendar? And does it fit in the amount of time you have available? If it doesn't, then you ask yourself, how can I make it fit in the time I have available? And you build your plan around those two pieces, right? It's like a puzzle coming together. You're not building it around your ideal version of your schedule. You're building your plan around how much time can you realistically protect in a day, in a week, in a month. And you're fitting those highest leverage activities in there. And then you're committing to them. That's what the bare minimum plan looks like. The last component of the bare minimum plan is the result that you're creating through the bare minimum plan. You want to be incredibly specific. The result that you're creating, you know exactly what activities you're going to do and the result you're planning to create with those activities. It could be that you decide, I'm going to implement the bare minimum over the course of this next quarter or these next 3 months. And by the end of those 3 months, having executed the bare minimum, I'm going to have another 500K in my pipeline or another 800K in my pipeline, as an example. Or I'm going to have fully collected all of the money owed to me, nothing outstanding, or I'm going to have an 80% close rate, whatever those metrics are. Or I'm going to have this new piece of intellectual property built out. You might argue, well, business owner thinking time shouldn't be part of the bare minimum. But I would argue with you that you spending time, even if it's 15 minutes a week, purposefully putting your business owner hat on, asking and answering high quality questions for yourself is some of the most important time you can be spending because it helps you to zoom back out, unlock places where you might just be doing things on autopilot and not realizing that you're just consistently repeating the same results over and over again. So that's why it's really important for some form of business owner thinking to be part of your bare minimum plan. The example that I'll give you as a bare minimum plan is pipeline building, right? You can go download that ACE business development block at acebd.com, and it walks you through exactly how to spend 26 minutes of your day filling your pipeline through ACE, right? Attracting new clients, inbound leads, connecting with your warm network, and expanding your network so that you're not stuck with just the current circle of people that you know. It's very simple, 26 minutes a day. Okay, part 3. This part is what brings this to life, the bare minimum success. How do you make your plan successful? You could have an amazing thought plan. You could have an amazing bare minimum plan, those first 2 steps. Now, how do we actually make this work? And I'm going to give you 2 pieces here. The first is pressure testing this. This is a really important question to ask yourself after you do those first 2 parts. And here's the questions. If I only do the bare minimum, how likely is it that I'll hit my goals? Ask yourself that question. Go back to what you just built out in the first 2 parts and ask yourself the question, if I only do the bare minimum, how likely is it that I'm going to hit my quarterly goals, my yearly goals? Why? Why not? All of those questions are so important to pressure test this because we could write down the best bare minimum plan, but if we don't believe it's going to result in those revenue goals that we put in part 2, then it really doesn't matter. We don't want to be doing work just to be doing work. We don't want to be doing work just to feel productive. We don't want to be doing work because I told you to, right? You want to be doing this work because you believe that it will help you create your goals and bring them to life. The question is, if you only do the bare minimum, how likely is it that you'll hit your goals? And then the last piece of the bare minimum success factor here is commitment. As you're implementing this plan, it is not, will this work? It is not, I hope this works. It is not, I'll see if this works. Instead, it is, I am figuring out how to make this work. The question is, how will I make this work? Not will this work? There's a huge difference. And our brain is designed to answer the question in the exact way we ask it. So be careful. How will I make this work? How am I making this work? Be clear on exactly what your bare minimum plan is. Set a specific start and end date for yourself. I'm going to start it on June 1st and go through August 31st. Implement it. Give yourself enough data points to say, I've done this bare minimum and here's the result that I've created with it. And it's 90% of what I expected to create, or it's 110% of what I expected to create. Evaluate and adjust so that you've got a well-polished, well-tested, predictable process for yourself that leverages the bare minimum. So you always know what it is that you need to be doing when you work on your business, at a minimum, of course. So let's wrap up today's episode to put this into action. Number 1, decide what your bare minimum plan is for this season. Create your bare minimum thinking that goes with it. Decide and create your bare minimum success strategy with the start and the end dates and your commitment and your pressure testing. And I gave you a starting point, a cheat sheet, if you will, to go download the bare minimum business development plan. You can find that at theacebd.com, which is theacebusinessdevelopment.com. So BD stands for business development, obviously. Theacebd.com. That will help you to learn how to build out that repeatable daily business development routine. That's your new bare minimum. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melisaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.